There.
Good evening, music lovers. What I want to know is, listen, hold it. Are you ready? I want to tell you something. We are here tonight because you and I have great taste.
The next person we'd like to bring to your attention is probably the quietest man in rock and roll.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ear Mob Podcast. I am your humble host, Chaz Stumbo. So today we've got quite a bit of a different episode and a different subject matter that we haven't touched on yet, really. But many of you may know already, if you know me personally and you've seen my posts on Facebook and that type of thing, you guys know that I am a massive John Bonham fan. I am a drummer. I've been playing for years and years and years, and massive John Bonham fan, massive Led Zeppelin fan. I don't collect memorabilia as much as I like to collect the unreleased live recordings. I'm very fanatical about that, upgrades. One comes out that's remaster or better upgrade than what was already out there, I have to have it. So I started reaching out to some of my friends that I've been going back and forth with for years and years and years, some of them going back 30 years. And one of the ones that I reached out to about doing this is the guest that we have today. I have a gentleman by the name of Mark McFall on today. Mark runs the website zeppfan.com, so that would be https://zeppfan.com. It is the gathering place for Led Zeppelin collectors. The site, if you haven't checked it out yet, please go do. Join Mark's mailing list on there. I mean, it's just broken down by year, venue, tons of memorabilia. I mean, anything that you could never possibly think of that was put out to promote Led Zeppelin, whether it be 45s, concert posters, tickets, prints such as magazines and everything right there, that is the go-to place. So at this point, let's welcome Mark to the podcast. Mark, how you doing?
Hey, Chaz. How's it going, buddy? I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good,
Love the
man.
Intro.
Oh, thanks, man. Thanks. So, Mark, you're a huge Zepp fan. You're doing the rest of us a service, man. Your website is just insane, if I must say.
Oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, I think the ideas with the website is one of my bucket lists through Zeppelin collecting and so forth was to put out like a coffee table style memorabilia book. And of course, with printing being so expensive, and once you print, there may be mistakes or there's updates. I thought the website was the perfect time to do it. We could always update it, change it. And the whole idea with the website is really just getting everybody involved, all collectors. So if you ever look through everything, like you mentioned, we have LPs, 45s, fanzines, magazines, books, songbooks, memorabilia from all releases. So it's really about just getting everybody involved, all the collectors. They could showcase what they have, and it's just a perfect time to share Led Zeppelin online and just kind of get all the collectors together.
Well, back in the day, this stuff wasn't all in one place, such as your website. So, I mean,
Yep.
We were all out and, oh my God, there's a new Rolling Stone magazine with Robert Plant
Yep.
on the cover. Or, there was that typical maybe once or twice a year, the Rolling Stone Led Zeppelin issue, which was like a rehash, with maybe one new interview with one of the guys or somebody close to the band. And I mean, we all ate that stuff up like candy. So it's really nice to see all of that stuff in one spot, and man, I know, a lot of people just don't realize how much work goes into putting something like that together. And you're not doing it because it's not a financial gain for you.
Definitely not. Yeah.
It's more because of the love of the band and the fact that they gave you so much with their music and everything like that. You just wanted to give back to the fans.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, for me personally, if I started collecting in the early 80s, got really heavily into video. From that point on, at one point I did a fanzine called No Quarter. And, I just, being around Zeppelin, that's all it is. I just wanted to consume myself with Zeppelin. If it was live tapes or if it's memorabilia, I just cannot get enough of it. And again, that goes to the idea of the website, right? Because there's just so much Zeppelin. I've met so many great collectors, and being able to go into their houses and take photos of their collection and just share your experience like yourself, right? Because you're totally into Zeppelin. It's totally nice to sit around and talk to someone like you about Zeppelin because they get it, right? They get why Zeppelin is awesome, why collecting memorabilia is awesome. Some people don't understand why they need 30 copies of Led Zeppelin 2, but they do, right? They're looking for 33, 34 copies. So it's really cool. So yeah, that was really the idea. And I think that's the wonders of the internet, that it brings all these people together. Another thing I wanted to touch on, you mentioned like Rolling Stones and all that gold mine back in the day. That's how we hunted stuff down before internet. Think about that. We used to write everybody, handwrite letters, just introduce ourselves. What Zeppelin do you have? Just waiting for that letter to come in the mail to see what you could find. So good times, man.
Oh, man. And I was talking with a friend of mine the other day. I don't know if you know him at all. He's another huge Zeppelin collector. He actually got me started. And it was funny because I come from Vegas. And this would have been like 88 or 89. I mean, I was a Zeppelin fan and had the cassettes, but I had no idea. I mean, I was still in high school. I had no idea about live recordings, bootlegs, anything like that. It just, there was nothing like that in Vegas. So I had no idea. I mean, we snuck a tape recorder in and recorded Striper when we were in ninth grade,
Nice.
And that we shared that with each other, but that's all we had, We didn't have anything else. So I'm listening to, by chance, I'm driving home from like marching band practice or something like that. And I'm listening to the radio and I hear some guy talking with the DJ. And then I hear this live version of No Quarter and it sounds amazing. And they go through the main thing where everybody comes in and they rock out. Then it kind of fades, where after that first chorus, it drops out again. And then, John Paul Jones is doing his thing. You hear some theremin going on in the background. And then you hear these timpanis, these phased timpanis, just this roll. And you hear, they're building up. And then you hear the theremin just with the delay. And it's just crazy. And it sounds like it's building to this massive thing. And then the recording cuts. And it starts again, it comes back in with, like the piano and the groove and everybody's doing their thing. And I searched for that thing for a long time and come to find out it was the Destroyer recording from Cleveland 77. And I had no idea at that point. Well, a buddy of mine worked at a music store. And this guy comes in one day and he's looking at guitars and my buddy's got a Led Zeppelin shirt on. And so this guy starts talking to my buddy about Led Zeppelin and my buddy said, yeah, I got a friend. He's a huge John Bonham fan. And this guy says, hey, well, here's my phone number. Have your buddy give me a call because I have a lot of live recordings of Led Zeppelin that he's probably never heard.
Right on.
So my buddy tells me, and I'm freaking out. So I call this guy and he's like, yeah, you guys come on over and listen to some stuff. So we drive clear across town to this guy's house and he's like, so what are you into? I'm like, man, I want to hear a live version of Kashmir. That's like my favorite Zeppelin song, right? So he puts on this live version of Kashmir and it's just blowing me away. And it's an audience recording. And it's this crystal clear audience recording. It ends up being 6/21/77, which for everybody, that's the Listen to This Eddie show, Mike Millard recording, Los Angeles Forum. Inglewood Forum, sorry.
Yeah,
right?
the famous 6/21/77.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
So I said, man, will you make me a copy of that? He's like, yeah, dude, it's $10 a tape. It's 2 tapes. So I go to the ATM, my last $20, give them to him. I drive all the way back to his house like a day later and pick the tapes up. Really no idea what to expect other than, I've got these 2 tapes in my hand, these 2 Maxell, XL2 Chrome, 90-minute cassettes in my hand. So I go back to my house, pop, part 1 in the tape deck, put on these headphones and just lay on the floor and close my eyes. And it was the most insane experience ever. I mean, it was the greatest thing. And that started what has become, like so many others, this passion and this drive to, one, get everything that's out there, and B, when an upgrade comes out, you get that, you know? So that's what started it. And I think I get paid that guy's rent a couple times. And
Right.
you may know him and you may not, because he's not huge in the circles anymore. His name was Tony Gold.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And he used to do stuff in the Vegas radio stations too.
Right.
I know Tony for a very long time. Yep.
Yeah. Tony is a dear friend of mine. We talk almost daily, and we lost touch for a little while, but then we just, over the last 3 or 4 years, I mean, we talk daily. If we're not texting each other, we're calling each other. And when I told Tony yesterday that I was going to have you on, he's like, "Oh my God, Mark's such a cool dude." And I'm like, "I know."
Right on.
I know. That's why I'm having him on.
Yeah.
So, Mark.
Yeah. And I'm sorry. I'm just going to say, yeah, I think that's the coolest thing, because, you know, you have these relationships as far as people you met back then, because I've known Tony now, I mean, I'm guessing 30 years. It could be more, could be less. But yeah, I still correspond with a lot of people that I've known back then, because that's where the passion was. I mean, we all corresponded. We all waited at the mail to get those tapes and so forth. And when you got them, you just listened the hell out of them, because that's all you had at that point. It was brand new, and you just listened it from beginning to end. Where now with the internet, you just, you know, pop on YouTube, listen to this, listen to that. You don't experience it like we did back then, I think. So yeah, good times.
Yeah, and it, you know, it brought up something that I mentioned to Tony the other day. I said, you know, you brought up, you know, getting the tapes and listening to them from front to back and just really diving into them. You know, with the invent of the internet, and, you know, then being able to reach out to people and go, "Do you have this? Do you have that?" We were still burning tapes. And then it became CDs. We were burning CDs, right? We were dubbing tapes, burning CDs. And then with high-speed internet, then it became, well, I've got it sitting here. I'll just set it on this drive, and you use whatever software it was, and you pull it from my drive.
Yep.
So then with the hard drives getting bigger and bigger and bigger, now everybody's collections are on hard drives. For me, I mean, I still have a closet full of tubs that are filled with, you know, CDRs and some silver CDs in there and that type of thing that I refuse to get rid of, to my wife's dismay. But I have these hard drives sitting here, and all my entire collection are on these hard drives. And I got to thinking about it the other day, and it's not the same. It really is kind of taken a little bit out of it, just in the sense that, you know, before, man, I want to listen to, you know, 427-69, or I want to listen to, you know, Osaka 71. You had to dig through your CDs to find it, and it made listening to it that much sweeter. Now it's now it's like 3 or 4 clicks away. And it's just like, you know, you see a new source come out and you're like, "Oh, I just download it." And sometimes, I mean, I know there's tons of stuff that I've downloaded that I've never even listened to. It's just because I didn't have it on that hard drive, I downloaded it. So it's kind of taken some of that, you know, the fun out of it a little bit. And the fun is, what I mean is sitting there for, you know, 45 minutes as side A dubs, and then switching the tapes.
That meant something. You're devoted back then when you're recording stuff in real time.
Oh, man.
It's like a 2-minute download. I mean, it's like you're doing front and back, and same thing with videotapes, right? Because I collect, you know, that's always been my area that I've collected, is videotapes. And same thing, if you're taping, especially during the Page Plan era, there were so many of them. But yeah, each tape was 2 hours. So yeah, that's, you know, it's a full day's work to just do a couple tapes for somebody.
Right. And then, you know, it was, hey, we'll do blanks plus postage. So it was like, for every cassette you want, you have to send me 2. So, you know, 1 to record it for you and 1 to keep for myself. And I mean, it just got so crazy there for a short time, especially when, you know, you're flipping through Goldmine, like you mentioned, and you're trying to find this stuff, and you're like, "Oh my God, that guy has the, you know, the Earl's Court, you know, whatever." And you're like, "I got to get it from that guy." You know, Tony doesn't have it. I got to get it. So before long, my collection surpassed Tony's. So, you know, it was like, "Tony, I can't make you any more money, buddy, because I've got way more than you at this point." You know? So if you want something from me, you know, and I don't think I ever charged Tony for anything, because at that point it was just like, dude, just give me some blanks and we'll call it good. It wasn't like $10 a tape. I mean, I don't think Tony ever made a killing off of that stuff, but a lot of my lunch money in high school went to Tony Gold, that bastard.
Well, it could have been worse. You get to spend it on other things too, right? So it's like, that's not a bad investment. I mean, look at you now, still devoted to it because of that.
Yeah. And, now, I mean, it went from buying tapes, and blank VHS tapes. Then it was spools of CDRs,
Oh, yeah.
So what, there has to be one moment in time or one thing that started your journey, that set you on this path to being such a Zeppelin fan and a collector. I mean, what was that?
Yeah. So a similar story to what you had, right? Because I was in high school. I had a friend who lived across the street. I'm still dear friends with him today, and he's actually donated a lot of stuff to the website as well. He's a huge magazine collector. His name's Bob DeLearsider. But he was a huge Zeppelin fan. I remember this guy played Black Dog in third grade or fourth grade at the talent show, right? So he was a huge Zeppelin fan, and back then I wasn't that much into music. He lived right across the street. We started hanging out, and then you would go over to his house, and this dude had wall-to-wall Zeppelin, right? One of those guys, posters on the ceiling, on the walls, Circus magazine pullouts, cutouts, all that stuff. So he's devoted. Back then, you only had a couple books too. You had Tangent in the Framework, Final Acclaim, visual documentaries, and he was so into it, and I was so into the stories that he would tell me, because I was more into the backstories, like, oh, see that poster there? This poster happened in 1979, and they only did 2 shows in 1979 at Nebworth, and 300,000 people showed up. So he had all this knowledge of Zeppelin. So that's what kind of brought me into it. And then he was telling me, then he had all these live tapes. And sure enough, so I'm like, oh, cool. So collecting. So he actually sold me my first tape 3 days after. It started off with Jimmy with his hand in a bucket of cold water, that one. So that's a great, brings back a lot of memories. But it really had to do with him just being so into Zeppelin and telling me the stories behind it and showing me these live tapes. And again, opening my eyes to this new world. So I'm like, cool. Apparently there's Nebworth video out there. And this is in the early 80s, right? So obviously that didn't come out to much later, but I'm like, I'm going to write everybody in the UK that I could find and see if I could find the Nebworth video. And again, making pen pals. So I would just go through all his fanzines he had. Anyone in the UK, I'm like, hey, I'm Mark, da-da-da, you're looking for Nebworth or any Zeppelin, whatever. And just kind of went from there. And I just got, you get more addicted to the hunt, right? Because you're trying to hunt stuff down and you're waiting. And it's even when you buy stuff on eBay, getting that package or that envelope in the mail. So it was really just getting into, the idea of Zeppelin and the collecting part of Zeppelin. And that really just kind of spun me pretty hard, in that world. Then later on, a couple of years later, I became good friends with Taylor, who ran Zoso Magazine. So, and, I have to say, Zoso Magazine was a great part of the Zeppelin years in the 80s when not a lot of stuff was going on. And this guy would put out a Zeppelin magazine each month to Zeppelin collectors. And again, pre-internet, so it meant something. It's kind of like getting a Rick Barrett catalog in the mail. But I remember going up and hanging out with him, and, this guy's life was Led Zeppelin. And, because he'd have all these people sending in letters, photos, stories, and all sorts of stuff. I'm like, how cool is that? This dude's life is consumed by Led Zeppelin. He has Led Zeppelin around him 24/7. I want that. And I just kind of dove into it from there, and it never stopped. I used to collect pretty hard back then. I sold my collection, but I still have I'm still excited about it, but I just can't afford it as much as I can, because now with Zeppelin stuff, it's so expensive. So I just kind of collect here and there. But yeah, I was really just hanging out with that dude, Bob, and him getting me started in the Zeppelin collecting. So, I got a great story about that too. So you mentioned selling tapes. So he had a bootleg copy of Song Remains the Same, right? So what happened was he sold me my first bootleg copy of Song Remains the Same. He charged me $20. Not only that, I had to buy the tape. I had to bring the VCR to his house and had to buy the cable so he could dub it.
Oh
so
my God.
I still tease him to this day. I mean, like I said, he's the closest friend I have, but it's just so funny when you look back at that, that he had no equipment, but he's like, yeah, I could sell this to you. And I remember buying video back then, it was like, $1 a minute, because that was really, video in the 80s was really new. And I remember a guy in Washington had a bunch of stuff, and it's just cool. I've always been into video. That's always been my passion, trying to collecting videos, and I've hunted down a lot of 8mm. But yeah, I always still tease him about that story because I've given him so much stuff in the past, or I help him find magazines all the time. So yeah, love that story.
Yeah, I remember that is just crazy. I remember, Vegas wasn't crazy for like the bootleg stuff, like I mentioned, and Tony and like maybe two other people were my only source of Zeppelin stuff, other than like digging through Goldmine. And the bad thing with Goldmine was it was just so overwhelming, and you didn't know if you could trust the person on the other end of that envelope, because there was no email. This was, you went to the post office, got a money order, lick the envelope, lick the stamp, and away it went. And maybe a month and a half later, you got something in the mail, right? And you just never knew, because back then, nobody was worried about generations or how far gen down the recording was. Was it close to the master? Was it, how many times has that cassette been dubbed and dubbed and dubbed? So what was the quality on it? How far has it gone down? And I mean, I was just a kid. I just wanted the material. I didn't care anything about that. So where that started to bite me in the butt was back then something would come out like 42769 Fillmore West, right? That probably the second batch of tapes I got from Tony. And Tony was wise. Tony had it figured out. He would record it, and if there was any dead space at the end of the tape, like say the side 4, there wasn't anything on side 4, he would just kind of put some sample stuff.
Oh yeah, that's a good part about collected. Yep.
Right.
What's on the samples? Yeah. All right. Yeah,
right. So then, you flip over side 4, and he'd written down, this is, LA Forum 70, and this is this, and this is that, and this is Zurich 80, and the people have to understand that back then, the amount, and you'll agree with me on this, the amount of stuff that was out there, like just in general that we had access to, there wasn't a lot. I mean, there really wasn't. It really exploded in, I think, the 90s and, 2000s, I think, is really when it went crazy. But back then, there wasn't a lot. So at some point, like I said, I tapped Tony out. I'm like, Tony, you got anything new? Nah, man, not right now. And then, he'd call me, dude, I got a new tape from Jimmy Moss. I'm like, oh,
Jimmy, yeah, Georgia,
right,
yeah, I know
right.
Jimmy, yeah.
So that, and it's funny because everybody knows everybody from back in the day. It's just crazy. But he's like, I got a new. It's an upgrade to 42769, man. It sounds so much better. The intro's longer. All right, dude. Here's $20.
No PayPal back then. It was real cash. Right?
Nope. It was $20 in gas money. To drive across town. And
I was going to say there was no database back then too. So you're just kind of going on, your own database. You start making your own list of what you have, what you don't have, or what you've heard, and what you want to get from the sample tape. But hey, so I got a quick story for you on that 427 tape.
Lay it on me.
Yeah. So in the early 80s, and I think I was responsible for the upgrade. Obviously, it's been upgraded more times since then. But in the early 80s, me and my friend Bob, he had this guitar, like a double neck guitar that he bought someone. It was all in pieces. So we brought it into a guitar shop in Saratoga, California to see what it would cost to get fixed. So we're in there, we're talking about it. Zeppelin, of course, comes up. And the guy that works there is going, oh, yeah, I taped them off the radio on K-Fog, the show. And we're like, what? Back then it didn't exist, if I remember correctly, or there was only just a couple songs. So he's like, yeah, come back, in a couple of days, and I'll let you have the tapes. I'll let you borrow them to record them. So he gave us these tapes, and they were masters that he recorded right off the radio, and it was the, soundboard performance of that show. And it was on 2 60-minute tapes, so I'm pretty sure it's close to what's already out there, unless some longer versions came out. But yeah, and you didn't realize how rare that thing was back then because you just didn't know what was out there. So of course, I'm like trading it to people because I don't want to buy anything. So I'm like, hey, I have this tape. What do you have in return? So, it's just interesting. You kept mentioning that 427 tape, and I probably gave it to Jimmy back in the day or Tony. So it's just like a full circle type of thing.
Yeah, and it's funny with that 427 show.
Love that show too, man.
Oh.
Zeppelin 69. Oh my gosh. I mean, every night's different. That's what I love about when you listen to them from night to night. They're just so powerful. There's just nonstop.
I mean,
nothing could compare to them.
Yeah, that was the band in their most primal state. I mean, they were on fire, and you could just listen to that tape in particular. You can just listen to it and close your eyes and just imagine Led Zeppelin, those four guys. I mean, they're all young at that point, and they're on this tiny stage, and they'd only been a band for maybe 6-7 months at that point, tops. And they're on this tiny stage in L.A., and they had come through there a couple times and tore it up, but here they are, and they're on this tiny stage. Or no, L.A., what am I thinking? It's Fillmore West, so it's San Francisco.
San Francisco, yeah, and headlining this time, right? This is the second time in San Francisco, so now they're headliners.
Right, and so they're headlining, and I don't know about you, I wouldn't want to go on before them or after. Oh. No way, no how. I mean, they tore it up, and Plant, his voice, nobody could touch that guy at that point.
Yeah.
And
it blows me away.
It's such a good show. And I mean, the As Long as I Have You medley. And I mean, they're not even doing Moby Dick at that point. It's still Pat's Delight.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just Train Kept a Rolling, just coming in with those drums. And I mean, you knew as soon as those drums kicked in, you knew that it was going to be a good show. And that's the thing, listening back to that stuff, especially back then, putting that in and hearing it for the first time, because it was like, all right, I got 621-77.
Yeah.
So the next thing I'm going to get...
Completely different too, right?
Completely different.
Yeah.
It was almost like two completely different bands. I'm like, just give me something from 69. I got towards the end, let me get the very beginning. And it just, I mean, my brain melted. And it's still...
Well, I love the...
I
was gonna say I love I Can't Quit You. Hearing that for the first time when he goes something like, I'm sorry, San Francisco, we have to leave you for a little while.
Right.
You hear the crowd goes, no, but it's like hearing that for the very first time. You're like, oh, how awesome is that?
Right.
Because Plant was awesome with he just had so much good crowd control and just, good stuff.
Right. And obviously that came from, years. I mean, he was young at that point. He and Bonzo were barely 21 at that point, if 21, and so they just playing around England, they both had quite a bit of experience of playing before hooking up with Jimmy and John Paul Jones. And I mean, it was like the two professionals with these two young guys, and it just created such, it was nothing's ever going to be like that again, and nor should it ever. I mean, there should only ever be one Led Zeppelin, and I'm sorry, Greta Van Fleet, you don't count. But not a fan. Just, I'm sorry, man.
Before that, it was Wolf Mother, stuff like that. I mean, you got to have respect for it, but it truly shows the talent of that band, though, for sure. For Zeppelin in '69, I mean, it's just unbelievable. I was reading Dave Lewis's concert file book, or the evening with Led Zeppelin, I think it's called, that massive book that he put out, and I'm trying to read it from beginning to end, and there's just so much data there, and getting through that 69 stuff. Obviously, you have the hard drives, and I was like, I want to listen to these shows, and I got into a 69, binge, and just night to night, it's just completely different. They're type of loose, like Dave Lewis's magazine, but they were just, the way they played just was awesome.
There's never going to be anybody else like them, like I just said. And, a lot of people still aren't privy to, Led Zeppelin live as we are. I mean, we've been collecting for so long that generally nothing really gets past us. Something comes out and we find out about it, whether it be through, the badge holders only mailing list that's still going,
right.
Or it is, we hear about it through, dime a dozen, or we hear about it from one of our friends. And now the dynamic has changed. It's me calling Tony going, oh my God, dude, the Bloomington 75 show with Wanton Song and Levee Breaks, the audience recording just came out. So we're listening to the audience recording, and the show is actually a rather good show,
Not bad. It's not bad for sure.
And then, the soundboard's coming out. And we get the, Empress Valley releases the soundboard. And then it's like, Wanton still cut. It was so good. It's still cut.
Always something. Yep.
Oh, man. Like 62177 with 10 Years Gone is cut. You're just like, so good. And then there's that cut. So, I mean, it's just all these years of collecting stuff. And I mean, this is back when we started, when you and I started, was right close to right around the same time. So, I would get this VHS tape that I would pay $20 for. It would be like Led Zeppelin Volume 1. And it would have like Danish, like a real grainy version of Danish TV, which probably wasn't even complete. And then like this version of this music video for Whole Lot of Love with a topless chick kind of dancing in the background.
Beat Club,
right? Oh. And I mean, and then some, 8mm footage on it. And I mean, that's all we had. There was no Earl's Court 524 complete, 525 complete. There was no Nebworth shows. There was no, Song Remains the Same outtakes. There was none of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, you want to talk about video. I mean, that's, as I mentioned earlier, that's my passion. So I remember, and that talk about generation, VHS to VHS, that generates really quick. But I remember Danish was just like a 2-minute clip that was only available, and that was like the thing to get. And that generated from a Norway TV show from 1985 with a Plan interview. Like they aired a small clip. So just like little things like that would come out. Then I think Communication Breakdown popped out from a show called Tales from the Crypt or Tales of the Crypt or something like that. So it's just really interesting on everything. And then mentioning soundboards. Think about how many soundboards are out now. The entire 75 tour is just about out. When you started collecting, you had Destroyer, you had 427, Dallas 75, just like a partial came out. And I'm not sure if there's much else. Oh, Zurich 80. But, that's what we had. And it's just interesting to where everything's at now. And I think sometimes with the internet and all of that, the excitement level, it comes and goes, right? It's like, hey, here's a new show, like this new show you talked about, the Minneapolis. So it comes out, but no one's, okay, that's great for a minute. Now what's next? No one takes time to savor what's out there, like savor when the levee breaks. I mean, this is a big deal. I mean, you've always read about it. We have tapes of it now, and here it is. But now it's with the internet, it's more like read it, got it, what's next? And you got to thank Empress Valley by all means, because they've cranked out those soundboards for the last 20 years of the entire tour. So it's really good. Now it's you hear, another 75 soundboard. Okay, that's good. Not that excited, but back in the day, it was everything, especially a full show.
Right, and with the releases that come out, we all Denny and I used to talk about this constantly. It's like, dude, they've got, what else could possibly be out there? I mean, seriously, we've gone through this and we collect all this stuff, and Denny used to talk with Empress Valley all the time, so he'd kind of have the know. He was good friends with Mr. T from Tarantura, so he would be in the know on a lot of this stuff, and he would email me or call me and go, dude, rumor is this is coming out, or this is coming, and then he just had a way of making friends with tapers. He became really good friends with, Freezer, and so to where I started talking to Freezer a little bit, not anywhere near the level that Denny did, but it was just, I wanted to hear the experiences that these tapers had of taping the band and seeing the band, and that's where I was into at that point. But then something would come out and it would just blow my mind. Like when Vancouver 75 soundboard came out.
Oh yeah.
It was just like, where did this come from? And so then we kept talking about, hey, what else could possibly be out there? And And then, we would get like with MTV had like their Led Zeppelin weekend, and they played like Dazed and Confused, the live version, the colored version of Dazed and Confused in color. And that was from '69. I forget that it was like Super Show or something like that. I think it was called.
Yep.
They played that, and nobody had ever seen it before. It was like, oh my God. Then they played 10 Years Gone from Nebworth. And it was like, oh my God, that footage is amazing. I would love to have that entire show. Well, then we ended up getting that entire show, and you watch it 3 or 4 times and it blows your mind. And then you just kind of put it on your shelf with all the rest of your Zeppelin VHS tapes that you're displaying proudly. So when, people come over, you're like, where'd you get that? Well, there's a long story to that. But I mean, the kids today, they're so spoiled. It's right there, and it's on their hard drive in 2 minutes, where it just took us so long to get stuff back. And there was, it was like 1% of what's out now, Yeah. And it just amazes me that stuff still comes out that nobody knew existed, like Atlanta Pop Festival. '69. Oh yeah,
or the Japan '71 that just came out a couple years ago. I don't know how old was that, last year. That's pretty wild too. A soundboard of Japan.
Right, and we had the what was it, 929, and it sounded pretty good, and they did Friends, and that it was just an amazing shit. Where's Bonzo? He's off with case. Well,
too much rice in the hair. Too much rice in the hair.
Well, what? Well, fuck you, mate. Funny stuff like that. It was, we had the like little 2-minute clip of the sound check for Southampton.
Oh yeah.
And everybody knew the show was recorded. It's just nobody had it in general trading circles. And there were people that had stuff, and you had like what was it? I forget the first name. It was Jimmy's Freaks Club or whoever it was that had that, where they were, trading low gens and unreleased stuff.
Billy.
Billy. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. And you had stuff like that. And then people were kind of trading stuff. And then, Denny and I went on this whole odyssey of finding low gen stuff and trading for low gens and that type of thing. And that's all out the window at this point. Those are coasters at this point. All that stuff's out there with, like Winston doing his remasters, and, You Hot on the Trail of stuff, and, Dad Gad and and the JEMS people and now Dogs of Doom. It's crazy how accessible everything is to everybody now. And you brought up a good point that, when stuff wasn't really accessible, it just had this whole magic to it. Well, it's kind of the equivalent of, when you have a steak once every 6 months, it's the best steak you've ever had in your world.
Right. Yeah.
But if you eat steak once a week, you get burned out on steak really quickly. So, as far as like we all, you and I collect the live recordings, and we froth at the mouth over that stuff still to this day. But as far as like the memorabilia stuff, I know you got big into that. What was it? What drove you to start collecting the memorabilia? Because like you mentioned, that's high dollar stuff.
It doesn't get cheap, and it just, as time goes on, I think originally what started it back in the 90s is actually Proximities magazine. He did a special on displays. One of his magazines were on displays. And I'm like, oh, I want to start collecting displays. And just like that, because having that collector attitude, need everything, I went out and just, hunted everything down. Luckily, back in the day, we had Rick Barrett. So Rick Barrett obviously was the source. He was the Amazon of Led Zeppelin, right? So he had everything Led Zeppelin. So he was a good source. But again, it was tracking it down and finding it in other places. So, I got into displays, got into everything else. And, as you collect and get really heavy into it, you have to kind of pinpoint what you want to do, because there's so many different areas. One of the areas I couldn't get into was, posters, concert posters, only because the dollar amount is so expensive. Recently, I just got into handbills, because I love the artwork, right? And the cool thing about concert posters and handbills and same thing with tickets. I mean, these happened on that day, right? If that ticket was in that person's pocket at that show, that's when it was ripped. So it's authentic. It happened at that time. Same with those handbills. And once those handbills were, after that show's over, those handbills all went away. Everyone threw them away. And if you saved one, you saved one. So yeah, I got into handbills for a while, and then that was it. But yeah, it's just a matter of just wanting more Zeppelin. I mean, just loving the band and just wanting to be around it and just finding, and again, like I mentioned earlier, it's about the hunt. It's meeting people, hearing the stories, finding new things, uncovering it. Because now we have eBay where people, you got the same 10 people bidding on one item. So it's like, okay, that's always going to be there. But what about what's out there that people don't put on eBay, right? It's hunting that down. And that's how we did it in the old days. And that's really how you find other stuff too, because it just, I'm just very passionate and very aggressive with wanting to find stuff. And again, once you get it in the mail, store it away, put it in plastic, put it away. Okay, what's next? What am I going to do? So it's just the fun of finding it other than on eBay and stuff like that. So, and again, it's just the passion of Zeppelin. And that leads me back to the website. I'm doing the website. It just, being around the Led Zeppelin collectors and just being able to talk about collecting and just people sharing what they have. And, someone pulls it out of their collection, like, check this out. It's a heavy. You could see their eyes just glisten because they're so excited about this piece they have. And being a collector, I get that. Not everybody gets that. But when you can see that, or, why do you have 40 copies of Led Zeppelin 4? Then there's a reason why. Everything's a little bit different. If you go to my website, like on the singles section, I have over 1,000 singles on there. And, it's just amazing the different types of singles, whereas, people collect them because this one has the Warner Brothers label. This one doesn't have the Warner Brothers. This has the copyright symbol with a circle around it. This one doesn't. I mean, that takes a lot of research, to do all that. So I just love the game. I mean, I love being part of it. I love collectors. I love collecting and hunting it down. So it's just always part of me. I can't stop.
Yeah, I remember thinking that I was a badass because I had quite a few magazines, and then Tony coming to me, hey man, John Bonham's brother's putting out this cool thing. It's called Bonham by Bonham, and it's these 8x10s and this poster.
Yep.
They're numbered and they're limited. He's like, I can get you one for $75. I'm like, dude, $75 is a lot of money for an 18-year-old, but I've got to have it. So and I still have that somewhere in a tub around here. It's one of those things where I pull it out like once every 10 years and kind of look at it and go, man, I should frame these pictures, or at least make copies of them and frame them. And, this would be cool. I got to start a music room and that type of thing. These got to hang up over my drums, and it just never happens. They go back in there and I just forget about it. And then it's like, oh yeah, I've got that. And, to have those, or the Chicago 80 tickets, that as far as Zeppelin memorabilia, I mean, it was that stuff. And I think I owned an original copy of the Oakland 77 poster because I had this big coffee table book, and it was called the Art of Rock, and it had a big purple cover, and it was a big giant heavyweight tabletop, coffee table book, nice quality. And the reason I had that book was when I was younger, I'd say about 12 years old, for my birthday, my aunt sent me this box. And in this box were all of these. They weren't the handbills, but they were the postcard versions of the handbills for a lot of the Bill Graham Presents and Family Dog stuff.
Oh, yeah.
From the, like 67, 68, 69, 70, that type of thing. And there was a lot of Grateful Dead in there. There's a Jimi Hendrix, The Doors. There's a Zeppelin one in there. And the cool thing about them is some of them, which I still have, there was like 2 postcards. The posters, the artwork were on the front, on the back. It listed some of the other bands coming through, and some of those lists Led Zeppelin at like Winterland and that type of thing, just on like a calendar format. But some of those were uncut. There was 2 separate things, but they were still like one piece of cardboard. They weren't cut. So those were pretty cool. I still have those, and those were all those posters in high quality were in this book. So I used to just look at this book for hours. and think to myself, man, I'm growing up in the wrong time period. I should have been alive back then. Look at all of these bands that I love that played back then. And
you could have got the poster for free if you went to the concert, right? You would be spending $10,000 on it.
Right. So this was 1988, 89. And, I just started talking with Tony and getting tapes and stuff. And he's like, well, I got a buddy that, deals in memorabilia. He's like, what are you, other than Zeppelin, who are your favorite bands? I'm like, dude, I love Queensryche. So I started buying all this autograph stuff from this guy. And I said, Tony, ask this guy. I said, I am looking for a Zepp Oakland 77 poster. I said, I don't want a reprint. I want an original. I've got a job now. I'm making $8 an hour. I'm loaded, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have any bills in the entire world other than car insurance and gas. I'm loaded.
Yeah.
I want that poster. So it took about a month, and he says, he's got one. It's $45. I'm like, what? He said, $45 and it's yours. He's like, it's an original. I said, I'll take it. I got it. I went to get it framed. The frame was $100 because I got it matted real nice. The frame was $100. I hung it up on the wall for about 6 months, and then it just went in the closet because I, moved a couple times. And I never wanted to hang it up again. So I carried that thing around until the glass on the frame got broken. Then I rolled it up in a tube, stuck it down in a tube, taped the ends of the tube up so no other air could get in there, no light, nothing, and hauled it around for another 15 years. And then about 2 years ago, I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to sell this to somebody that's going to appreciate it a little bit more than me, and I'll just buy a reproduction for $20 because then I can hang that on the wall and not freak out if something happens to it. So I think I sold the poster for about $400.
Nice. Yeah.
And I'm like, well, it only took 30 years to make some money on it, but that's fine. But have I bought the reproduction of it? No, but I'm okay with that. You
have the memories of it. That's what it's about, right?
Right. And it was a big deal. That was the only Zeppelin poster that I wanted because I just thought it was so cool with that futuristic blimp over the futuristic Coliseum. And, it was like Blade Runner to me. And I'm like, oh, that's such a good poster.
Yeah. I love that poster. Yeah.
Right. And, I didn't have the money to dive in and get any of these other posters. And, the only other one that I've wanted over the years is the one from, I think it's Arizona 70 or Arizona.
Oh, yeah. Is that blue one? Is it blue or the yellow one? I always get those two confused.
The blue one. Blue one. Yeah.
Okay.
That is such a cool poster. And I mean, other than memorabilia, magazines, I had the 77 tour program for a while, just a few silver, bootleg CDs here and there. But I mean, I never got crazy into the memorabilia. I just remember going over to Tony's house and him flipping through these photo albums of all these unpublished photos. And
oh yeah, I traded a lot of photos with Tony back in the day.
Oh right,
he traded a lot. Yeah.
He's still got all of them. I mean, that's a big deal to Tony. He's still got all those. And dude, Tony, I absolutely love that guy to death. Would do anything for him. When the Zeppelin reissues came out, it was in my plan to buy the box sets. Well, it didn't happen. I just couldn't afford them at the time. So Tony had bought all the box sets for him. So he called me one day. He's like, hey, come over to my house. I got a present for you. So I go over there and he hands me this big box and I open it up. It's all the box sets minus the CDs and the hardcover book, but all the vinyl was still in there.
Oh, very cool. Wow.
He's like, here, he's like, I've got the CDs. He's like, the download cards are still in there. Never downloaded them. You can download all the stuff. He's like, they're yours. He's like, I don't have the space for them, and I know you didn't get any of them. He's like, I can't give you the books. I got to keep the books. I'm like, I'm not sweating the books. I've got the vinyl now. I'm cool with that. So, with Zeppelin, all of us collectors, whether it be the music or the memorabilia, I mean, it's just, it's a tight knit community for the most part, as far as like, you and you've got Brian Knapp and you've got Tony and you've got, Sammy did a book on the 40. I think his last name was Rapallo. I'm not sure. He did a book on all the 45s, and I mean, Dave.
Sam Contention.
Oh yeah, Sam. Yeah, there you go.
Well, he did too. He did his first book on his own. I actually helped him with his second book.
Right.
So we did the second book together.
Okay.
Yeah. But you mentioned the super deluxe box sets. I actually helped out with a lot of those. They contacted me and they were looking for certain memorabilia. So if you ever look at the super deluxe books, I have a credit in them.
Okay.
So that's why I like the deluxe books. You're like, oh, I don't need them. I'm like, wait a minute. Check out the deluxe books.
Like, hey, we were on a roll here, and now you threw a wrench in it. Yeah,
I think that's the biggest thing when the deluxe books. It's like, being from Zeppelin, you just expect this unexpected, and you look through them like, okay, these are okay, but I've seen more. But as you look through it again, you get it, and it's like, okay, these are really nicely done. But you just there's always that expectation for more, just like that Led Zeppelin on Led Zeppelin book they put out. You expect all these unseen photos you've never seen before, but being a diehard fanatic, you've seen most of the photos before. But yeah, the deluxe books are pretty good.
Right. And with the photos and such, I mean, Tony, you go over there and Tony would show me this photo of Bonham and he's like, look, what's different about this photo? I'm like, I don't know. He's like, dude, he's got an extra crash symbol. What? Boom, head explodes because, he only really, for the most part, throughout his entire career, other than, getting into Nebworth, and at that point, he only ever used 2 crash symbols. And then that third one poked in there, and it was mind-blowing, and diving more into that stuff. And, I mean,
that was a big thing. Oh, sorry to cut you off, but that was, I mean, you mentioned collecting photos. That's what we did back then, too, because you just had this thirst for the band visually. You looked at all the magazines, you looked at all the books, so it meant something to hunt down these photos. And think about trading photos back then. You'd have to go to Walmart and hopefully, or where did I go? Yeah, I think Walmart, they'd had this photocopier that they'd copy them and cut them for you. But, it was a big deal. And trying to get 1980 photos, those didn't even exist in the early 80s. And when you got a 1980 photo, you're like, oh my gosh, this is 80. But again, you go on the internet, you find everything. It's like, I feel there's pictures I've seen them all, but back then it was just that thirst for wanting more, just more of the band, see more visually. And just that helped when you listen to the music, right? Because what did you do when you listened to 427? You looked at your Zeppelin books, or you looked at this 69 tour program you have, or you looked at something Zeppelin-wise and just kind of fantasize about it all.
Right. And with the collecting, as far as Zeppelin is concerned, I mean, that was obviously the main band and still is the main band that you collect. Did it get you into collecting other bands as well?
No. Yeah, and I've met so many collectors that are into other bands too, and I'm like, how do you do it? There's like so much Led Zeppelin, and I have a friend who's also Led Zeppelin and he does Star Wars. It's like, well, those are 2 of the biggest collectible markets that you could find. I mean, that's, again, you have to fine tune as far as what you're going to collect. So yeah, I mean, it's always been Zeppelin, and I really like the solo stuff because I got into Zeppelin, in 83, 84. So at that time, all the solo stuff was happening. So while it happened, you kind of collected that too, because that's what was going on. You'd always collect Zeppelin, of course, but Robert Plant shows. It just, again, that thirst for collecting and trading and getting more stuff. So I did a lot of the solo stuff back then, but yeah, no other bands. I didn't have a passion for it. I mean, there was just something about Zeppelin, and it all started back from when my friend Bob told me all these stories, and then got me into the mystique of Led Zeppelin. And I think that's what, helps them grow now, because by them never reforming and just kind of ending it in 1980 like they did, I mean, that really, it just still keeps that mystique alive. They did the London show, which I thought was a great ending to it all. I'll never forget seeing Robert Plant drop the mic. As many times as I've seen Robert Plant, I mean, I must have seen, him and Jimmy Page and solo stuff probably about 50 times. I've never seen him drop a mic. And I remember at that show, he dropped the mic. We did it, and then dropped the mic and walked off. I'm like, fuck, that's just, knowing Robert Plant the way I feel I know him just from my collecting years, I'm like, that's it. There's not going to be, any reunion. There's not going to be any tour. That was it. There was one time it happened. He committed to it. It was an amazing show, but that was it. But I think that's, what keeps it all alive. is just them not getting back together and reforming. But yeah, for other bands, could never get into the passion of it.
Have you had the pleasure of meeting any of the guys in Zeppelin?
Yeah, I've met, I've met Plant a few times. I actually shared an elevator with him. Just a quick story with Plant. I was hanging out. It was in back east, and I was in Boston, and we were hanging out at the bar with our friends, and he was there with his band, very small bar, and we chit chatted. And I remember having a great conversation with him. It was the first time I ever met with him, and I kept telling him about, dude, you got to do James Brown. It's a man's world, because I love that song. And he's like, yeah, that's a great song, and he's like, give me this reason why he's playing other artists and da da da. And I remember him leaving. His friend came up to him and he's like, all right, Robert, we got to go. And he goes, and he put his arm around me. He goes, hey, it was nice chatting with you, mate. And I'm like, dude, I faded. I'm like, right on, that's cool. So he walked off, and I remember yelling at him, do James Brown, do James Brown. And then a couple days later, we kept running into the band. I ran into him at the Philly train station, because we're taking the train from Philly to Washington. And at that point, I'm like, I feel like a groupie at this point. I don't want to run into him anymore. So after the show, and I think it's Washington, me and my friend goes, let's not run into the band anymore. We don't want to see that. We don't want to run into, Plant, anything. So we get up to the hotel. We're at, I think, Four Seasons or Ritz-Carlton. We get out. Robert's right there signing autographs. We go, just walk by him. Don't even look at him. We're walking down the hall, and at this point, I've already talked to Poral and other people of the band, and I'm, walking them, see them in the hall. Hey, great show, great show. We're like, just go to the elevator, just go to the elevator. So we go to the elevator. Sure enough, who walks in? Robert walks in. He's holding a bottle of wine, and he's by himself. I'm like, oh man. I go, we're not stalking you. We're in the elevator first, and I'm like, hit rooms, floor six. And Robert ends up getting off on the same floor we do. I'm like, you have to be kidding me. So and then we start walking down the same hall, and I keep going, okay, room 637, letting him know that I'm looking for a special room. So we get to the room, and it's a friend, it's like four other girls that kind of follow him around too, right? So we get to the room, and I go to knock on the door, and Robert's room is right across the way. And I go, Robert, do you want to see who we're here with? He's all, sure. So he walks up behind us. I knock on the door. So the door opens up, and there's the four girls that have been, going to all the concerts. And here I'm standing with Robert Plant right behind me. And I'm like, hey, and she goes, you can't come in here, and shuts the door because the room was a mess. And I thought it was the funniest thing. So Robert goes to his room. I go, I'll see you downstairs later. And then I walk in the room. I'm like, hey, I bring Robert to the room. What else do you want me to do? So sure enough, we go downstairs, and then we're, our group's sitting at the bar having a drink. Robert comes up to our table. He's like, hey, I was on the wrong floor. That's not my room. I'm on a different floor. And he does this thing with his hands. He goes, I guess I'm a fool in the rain, and like shakes his hands and walks away. So, but yeah, that's one of my funniest stories that I met him. But I met him a few other times. I've met John Paul Jones a few times as well. He did a guitar signing side of photo, and I met Jimmy during the Greek theater shows at Page and Crows. So I stayed at the same hotel they did. So I ran into the band. It was cool because it was the last end of the show, end of the tour, because they did that like 6 shows or whatever. They did New York and Roseland, and they did Boston. I think they did 2 shows at the Greek. So it was the last one. So everyone was there partying at the hotel, and so I was just hanging out there and just met him, introduced myself. I didn't get a picture though. That's one thing. I have a picture with the other 2 members, and I got another thing. So I mentioned helping them with the DVD project. Or I'm sorry, I helped them with the Super Deluxe box set, all the remasters. Well, I originally helped them with the Led Zeppelin DVD they released in 2003. So one of my prized possessions is in 2007, I received this package in the mail sent by Dick Crothers, who was the director of Led Zeppelin DVD in Celebration. I got a DVD that says, Mark, thanks for all your help. And it's signed by Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, and John Paul Jones. So it's funny because I received this 7 years later or whatever it was, 5 years later. And it's only because the director was able to get everybody in the room to sign it. So that's one of my most prized possessions, is having that on my wall.
That's crazy. And that's probably, the only one, and that don't ever let go of that, man. Yeah. That's an heirloom for the ages right there. I had the pleasure, I had friends here in Vegas that I grew up with, and we were playing in a band together, and the guy's telling me, yeah, man, I this girl was at our show a month ago with this British accent, and she was talking about her brother who's a drummer, and and she wants to start a band. So, dude, it's Zoe Bonham. And,
Oh, wow.
you know, so I'm going to play these gigs with her, but I don't really like the music. You know, she's kind of a brat. And so I don't know if I'm going to do it. But, dude, you're a Zeppelin fan, and I don't really care about Zeppelin. You should do it. And I'm like, oh, well, that would be cool. But he's like, dude, you got to come down. And this is 1998. He's like, you got to come down to L.A. and meet her, dude. You're going with me next week for a gig. He's like, because I want out of the gig, and you're just going to kind of step in. He's like, she doesn't know it yet, but you're just going to step in. It's like, okay. So we drive down to L.A. And again, this is 98. They're touring on the Clarksdale album.
Oh, yeah.
So he's like, we're all going to the Chateau, or not the Chateau, we're going to the whiskey bar. He's like, we're all going there. He said, you know, Zoe's going to be there. Her mom's there. And he's like, it'll be a good time. So I'm going out of my mind. I'm sitting there and I'm meeting Zoe, and, you know, she's cool and she's nice and she's, you know, being nice to me and everything. And I'm sitting there talking to Pat, and, you know, I'm like, you know, I know you hear this a million times, but if I don't say it, I'll regret it. You know, I said, your husband was the man. I said, you know, it's just, you know, for what it's worth, you know, he's just very important in my life, you know. As a drummer, he's very important to me. Probably one of the most important drummers to me. And she was, you know, very nice about it. And she said, so you're going to play with Zoe? And I'm like, I don't know. If Zoe will have me, then yes, I will. You know, we'll see how tonight goes and if we get along and everything. And so Pat's talking to me, and then she's like, hey, she looks over and she gets this big smile on her face, and she stands up. And I turn my head, and I see this tall gentleman with what has to be the biggest, I just perceived it as the biggest head I've ever seen in my life.
Right?
And my buddy's just elbowing me, dude, you got to be shitting yourself. And I look up, and it's Plant. And I'm like, what? Oh my God. You know, never in a million years did I ever think that I would get to meet Robert Plant. And dude, I'm fan geeking out, right? I'm like, gotta be cool. Just relax. Yeah. He's a normal dude. He takes poos just like the rest of us. Just relax, you know? And so he sits down right next to me between Pat. And so it's Pat Bonham talking to Robert, and then me. And I'm just sitting there having a beer. And he turns and looks at me and introduces himself, and I introduce myself, and he's like, so you're going to be playing with Zoe? And I'm like, I don't know. He's like, well, what kind of music is it? And I kind of describe it. You know, it's kind of like Garbage at the time. They were popular, so it's kind of like that, but a little between Garbage and Sheryl Crow. So it was kind of cool stuff, you know, a little more bluesier as you would expect. But so he's like, well, what other music are you into? And I said, well, obviously Zeppelin, and, you know, Bonzo's very important to me. And he's like, yeah, he was very important to me too. And, you know, so he told me a couple stories, quick stories, and, you know, and he's like, you got to get into swing music. You like Gene Vincent? And I'm like, well, I've heard of him, but I've never heard him. He's like, man, you've got to listen to Gene Vincent. He's like, here's what you get. He's like, get this album and this album. So, you know, I'm sitting here and it's blowing my mind. I'm talking to Robert Plant about swing music.
He's so down to earth, right? I mean, he's just like very personable.
Dude, he was, and you know, I mean, to me, you have these, you know, thoughts in your head of what these people are supposed to be like. You know, you're like, this guy was in the biggest band of all time next to the Beatles. This guy's going to be a complete jerk. He was not, dude. He was the nicest guy I've ever met. And I've met, you know, rock stars that, like, Journey's another very important band to me. And I met Neil Schon one time, and it was at the NAMM show, and I waited in line to get his autograph. And I walk up there and I said, Neil, you know, huge fan, love the band. You know, Steve Smith is the reason I started playing drums, and da-da-da. And he's like, yeah, so? And he signs autograph and hands it to me, and I start to walk away. I'm like, oh, no, I'm not letting him get away with that. I turned around and I said, you know, I met Steve Smith like a half hour ago, and he was one of the nicest guys I ever met. I said, if it wasn't for him, I would go home right now and take all my Journey records and wipe my ass with them.
Wow.
And he just kind of looked at me, and I smiled at him and said, have a great day. And I walked away. I'm like, I am not going to let you get away with that, you know? And with Plant, it was the exact opposite. He was a super nice guy. And that was the only time that I've ever had the pleasure of meeting him and hanging out with him. I mean, you know that feeling. It's just, you're hanging out with somebody that you love and cherish their music, and then they're a nice person. That's like a bonus, you know?
I know. Well, you've seen so many interviews, and you feel like you know the band so well, and that the fact that they're right next to you is like, what am I going to say now? I mean, you just don't want, it just takes your breath away. But yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, I met him in '93. That was the first time I met him, and I backstage at Shoreline for the Page Plant thing. And I think I met him with Patty Griffin too. But yeah, he's just super nice. He's just he's very cool, down to earth. Big head though. I remember the ladies that I was with at the time at the Boston show, they pointed it out, like, look how big his head is over someone else's. But I guess that's why you get that primal scream, right, with that big head. So it's all about the aesthetics of your head. That's why Steve Perry's so loud, because of the nose, I guess. Who knows?
Right, and Robert, in the press, and when it comes to Led Zeppelin, and everybody wants Led Zeppelin to reform and play shows, and it's always Robert that says no. I won't do it. It's not right. It wouldn't be good. And he gets painted as the bad guy. And for him to be the nice guy, it's just, it kind of blows your mind, and it makes you love the band even more. I mean, it's just like, you know what? That guy is the real deal, And I'm sure, back in the day when Zeppelin was actually around, maybe it was a little bit different. But now, I mean, this was, 23 years ago, but it doesn't matter. He was a hell of a nice guy, and that means the world, and it makes you love the band even more.
Oh yeah. Did you went out and bought the Gene Vincent albums?
I never did.
Oh, come on, dude. Come on.
I know. Now with Spotify, I can go back and listen to them. But I mean, and I'll be honest with you. I went back. I was telling Tony, I went back about 2 weeks ago and listened to Now and Zen and Manic Nirvana again. And other than like, Heaven Knows and Ship of Fools and maybe one or two songs on Now and Zen, I don't think they hold up. The drums and the songs, some of the songs just seemed incomplete as far like lyrically and that type of thing. And they don't hold up to me. But if I go back and listen to the first two solo records, there's not a bad song on the two. And I can listen to those over and over and over again. And those are like, oh, that's the solo Plant I love. Yeah. And even like the newer stuff he did, I think like the last album that I really got into was Mighty Rearranger. And beyond that, it's
good album, yeah.
Yeah, it's just a little tough for me. I mean, I can appreciate it and I'll give them a listen once or twice, but beyond that, it's not really what I'm into, Yeah. And then if you go back like with the Coverdale Page record, I love that record. I mean, the lyrics are cheesy, but the riffs and
it's the best Page on record since Zeppelin. I mean, that's the thing with Jimmy. I mean, he hasn't done anything for us. That's the sad part. I mean, he could have been an awesome studio musician for other people, or do an album like Santana did, back in the day, and just have all these guest speakers. But I think with Jimmy, if it wasn't Led Zeppelin, he didn't want to do it. And if it wasn't Robert Plant, with Robert Plant, he didn't want to do it. And I think that's what you mentioned, Robert, and all the different albums. I think that's a singer at his magnitude is very lucky to be in that position and do what he wants. Because you take someone like Mick Jagger, I mean, he's still doing Satisfaction and all that. Who knows if he likes it or not? But, they're filling stadiums. But to be artistically growing like Plant does, I mean, he just at that point, ever since Page of Plant ended in '98, he kind of called all the shots, did the Alison Krauss thing and stuff like that, and just kind of does what he wants. I mean, he knows he's the rock god. You know, he knows he's the what is it, the hammer of the god, or what does he call it?
The golden
anyway,
god.
So yeah, the gold. Thank you very much. Yeah, he knows he's the golden god. He's lived it. He's experienced it. Now he's just doing whatever the hell he wants. And you have to have some respect for it. I've always been a Plant fan, so I take everything he does really good. I agree with going back listening to Now and Then. I think for me, it's just more memories of the time that I did back then instead of the actual songs, because I listened to it so much. I remember listening to that and Joe Satriani album so much. The cassette, I had a cassette with those.
Yep.
Now and Then on one side and Surfing with the Aliens on the other side. And I remember listening to those things back to back all the time. But yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting, and I think as I mentioned earlier with reforming, that's really it's actually good that they didn't, because even if they got back now, I mean, even after the '02 show, it just wouldn't be the same. It'd be great for the fans. Yeah, they're doing Led Zeppelin live. It's a concert, but it just, that feeling, that emotion that Zeppelin actually gave us back in the '70s, it wouldn't be there. Plant, as good as he is, I mean, singing Zeppelin must be pretty difficult, especially singing anything pre-'73 Zeppelin has to be really difficult for him. But he does a good job. I mean, he still does the Zeppelin songs, fine tunes them to the way he wants. But yeah, I think that really adds to the mystique of the band too. So good stuff. And
as far as the '02 show, I mean, when I found out that Jason was going to play on it, I was excited. I did the mail, the lottery for the tickets, and tried to make arrangements. My dad and I were going to go. He's like, "We're going." And we didn't get tickets, which is fine. I had a recording of the show like the next day off a dime a dozen, to listen to it. And it's like, oh my God, they did For Your Life, and I'm sitting here going, where's Achilles' Last Stand? But I get it. I get it. It was 2 hours. It wasn't
acoustic either, right? Yeah.
Right. And so, a lot of people hated it because a lot of people, if you're a drummer, you dig Jason Bonham, and you understand why he's good in the role, and you understand what he does and brings to it that's not his dad, but still makes it okay. Like it validates him as a drummer to be in that role and play that music. He's the only one that should do it. And we had all heard, oh, it's going to be Dave Grohl, or it's going to be this and that, and I'm like, Dave Grohl's great, but he's not that kind of drummer. And so when Jason did the gig and I could listen to it, I'm like, I really appreciate it. And, playing with Zoe and making the mistake of hanging out with Jason and Lemmy and trying to match him drink for drink one night didn't work out so well. But, hanging out with Jason, I mean, for a short time, for the year and a half that I was in her band, I was family. So you hear a lot of stories and you get to hang out, and, it's a really cool thing. And for me, even though I haven't talked to Jason in, many, 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 many years, he's still a friend to me. Like, it would be very easy to kind of fall back into just hanging out with him. And, that's why I was like, oh man, Jason's going to do a great job. I'm rooting for Jason, Well,
I tell you what, at that show, I will never forget, because I went to that show. I will never forget the feeling that I had the most, like, out of body experience or euphoric feeling, was the very end of Kashmir. When it just rocking really hard at that melodic sound, dun, 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 at the very end, I was just like in a different world. I mean, it brought me back to Live 77, right? For some reason, it was a great show. It was amazing seeing that, but I'll never forget that feeling that I had at the end of Kashmir. I'm like, fucking Jason. I'm not a drummer. I don't play instruments at all, but that song and the way he was playing just blew me away. I mean, that was, to me, one of the highlights of the show. There's a few other ones, but that was one of them, the very end of that song. Just something about it. They were just, and I know how much Plant loves that song, and Page loves every Zeppelin song. So, I mean, and Jim Jones on keyboard, so you can't go wrong. But yeah, that was just an amazing experience, and that song especially blew me away.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, my band, I was in a band in Vegas, and we played, at Mandalay Bay for 12 years. And what we did, it was a classic rock band, but we did all requests. So the premise was, if you request a song, it had to be a popular rock song or a popular band. If you request a song and we know it, we'll play it. If you request the band, if you request a band, then if we know a song by them, we'll play it. Well, we started to get requests for Kashmir, and we had done a couple things where we had done nights where we had played like Zep 4 in its entirety, bookended by some Zep tunes that we loved, and we did Fool in the Rain, and we always made sure to do Kashmir. We did Trampled Underfoot, Rain Song. We did some cool stuff, and I remember playing Kashmir and bum 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 bum, that last word, and you're talking about where Jason's going crazy or John would go crazy back in the day. And I just and I know the feeling that you're talking about, even though playing those Zeppelin songs were always the most stressful for me, it was also a lot of fun. And I know that it's a similar feeling that you got, but I was sitting on the backside looking out and playing, and during those parts in the songs, specifically that song, I just closing my eyes and going for it. And just trying to put myself, in that spot, sitting on John's seat, behind John's kit, even though my kit wasn't anywhere near that, trying to grab that feeling and, knowing, what, I'm a little bit closer to this than some of the other guys in the band, because I am such a big fan of these guys. And do you know Jason Walker?
Yeah. I know Jason. I've met him a few times.
Yeah. Jason and I have been friends for over 30 years. Yeah. And Jason was in my band also. So,
very cool.
Jason and I would, share different versions and go, okay, we got to get the guys to do this version. We got to get the guys to do.
Yeah. He's a great guitar player for sure. He always puts that stuff on Facebook. He's pretty amazing.
Yeah. He's a great guy. He's like the brother. He's like a brother from another mother, and I mean, just like any other thing, knowing each other for so long, we're both so passionate about it. We butt heads from time to time, but I love the guy to death and would give the shirt off my back for him, and he's such an amazing talent, and, he knows the Jimmy stuff inside and out, and, and he's known for it, but he's also kind of he's come into his own as his own guitar player. And I mean, the guy's a force to be reckoned with. There's no two ways around it. And, he was at the O2 show as well. I mean, he did he didn't win the lottery, but he, when stuff started hitting eBay, I think he went that route. And I mean, he went over there and he got into the rehearsal and he did the whole thing. And, I remember him coming back and him calling me going, dude, he's like, you missed out. He's like, this was the most ridiculous thing I have ever seen in my life. He's like, my life will never be the same.
Yeah. Well, and I think whenever you get Page and Plant together, right, because they're both great soloists, and, even though Page didn't give us much and Plant's always done his solo career, when you put Plant with Page, I mean, they're always going to perform at the top of their level. And especially then now you have Jason and you have John Paul. I mean, I just cannot believe, I'm not a musician, but I just cannot believe how that would feel not performing live, just rehearsing for it as long as they did 6 weeks or whatever it was, and doing a show. The nerves must have been there because they haven't played together in so long. There was no warm-up shows, nothing, just that sound check before. And they came out and they killed it. I mean, they really did. I mean, everything was just perfect. Plant was perfect. Jimmy was amazing. I mean, it was just all around. And, you can never say anything bad about John Paul, right? So, yeah.
Right. And you can never say anything bad about John Paul Jones. And I mean, a lot of people were like, oh, man, it was fantastic. And I would tell everybody, the reason it was so good was because they were feeding off of Jason. They did that show not only for the fans, but I think they did it. A big part of doing that show was for Jason because he wanted it so bad. And they said, we got to have Jason. And I mean, Jason came in and nailed it. And if you listen to interviews with Plant and, stuff like that, he'll say, Jason pushed us. Jason, when we start to fall into our old ways where we'd start slacking off, he's like, no, Jason cracked the whip and said, this has to be good. And Jason would play us recordings and go, man, what were you guys thinking when this was going on? Listen to this. Listen to how good this is. And I think it kind of reaffirmed their love for the band and kind of made them remember what it was like to be in the band back in the day and what could be, you know, what is, and then what could be, you know. And they came out there and as far as I'm concerned, dude, it was a grand slam. They did a killer job.
What about Redemption too? I mean, you had Live Aid and Atlantic 40th. Those weren't too good a reunion, so they needed to go out on a high note on that one. But yeah, it was nice to see them do a full show and just be accurate and great and amazing. But yeah, those other reunion shows, it's very sad only. But you know, I think the passion was there for the Live Aid show. I actually really enjoy watching the Live Aid. You could tell the passion's there, even though the playing wasn't. Atlantic 40th was just was not good. But if they had another shot at it the next night, it probably would have been amazing. But just that show, so it was a great time to redeem it themselves and do a full show, put an end to it, close the book, end the chapter.
Right, and I mean, they closed the book on Led Zeppelin, and I mean, like you said, it was just a fitting way to, you know, Amit, we did it, mic drop.
Yeah.
You know, it was a fitting way to put that to rest. And then, you know, we all find out, you know, hey, there was talk of other shows, but Robert doesn't want to do it, and you know, Jimmy got all pissed off for a while and that type of thing. And, you know, because Jimmy, like you said, hasn't done anything else. And if it's not Robert or it's not Zeppelin, you get the feeling he doesn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And you know what? He has that right. You know, nobody should criticize him for that. And the only people that criticize him are us hardcore fans. You're like, dude, we deserve to see this. We got plenty, you know, he's given us plenty. That leads me up into my next little thing, the 50, you know, the reissues, the 50 years, the lack of real, you know, Jimmy mentioned, there's going to be some great surprises coming out. I've got a lot of stuff coming out. And then we get, you know, a single with 2 outtakes on it and a book and really not much more of anything. I mean, I don't know about you. I'm kind of bummed out over that, you know?
Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think 2 and 3 were good for the extras. I believe that's you're referring to as like companion disc. 2 and 3 were good. I mean, some of them had some other stuff. I thought Coda was great because Coda was the mismatch, right? Everything else that couldn't go on other companion discs went on that. So I listened to Coda quite a bit for that companion disc. But, you know, I agree. It was kind of let down, especially when you're, you know, being a fan as we are, and you're listening to it going, what's the difference? Like listening to the Led Zeppelin 4 or the Untitled album, you're listening to that, the companion disc, and like, I could barely tell a difference. I mean, you're thinking, is that different? Is that different? But when it's that small, it's more of, you know, you want something completely different. Like the Whole Lot of Love version they had on there. When you listen to that, you're like, yeah, that's different. That's very cool. But yeah, those companion discs, it's from my understanding, and it's just stuff you hear, and I don't know how true it is. It just that was one of the reasons. I mean, they had to do the companion disc in order to do the remasters. It wasn't just remasters the album. So I guess that's what Jimmy had, and who knows if they actually have anything in the vaults. Maybe the way they recorded, maybe they just went in there, did their 8 songs, and that was it. They didn't, you know, do a lot of different demos, especially towards the later years. You would think they just kind of went in, they cut it, and left.
Right. And Coda is also my favorite. Coda. And you know, I was hoping that there would, like, Presence would have given us a little bit more for Presence. But, you know, they recorded that album under such stressful circumstances. Yeah. You know, there probably isn't a lot left on that guy.
Except that weird version of, what did they do where it sounds like Dr. Hook? Dr. John,
right?
Whatever that is, it's like, what out of all things that come out of the companion disc, we get this. It's right. Like, all right, we'll do it.
A little bit of a thing in the morning, right?
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things on the companion disc on Coda, on the When the Levee Breaks, the way the different versions, that to me sounds like, if you go back and listen to Fate of Nations, Robert Plant, Promised Land. I don't know if you're familiar with that album. That's all.
Oh, yeah.
Can't eat, can't sleep, can't understand a love song. That totally has that same groove. And I wonder if that's where he got that from. because if you listen to it, you're like, yeah, that kind of, it kind of has that same groove. I actually love that solo album. That's one of my favorite solo albums. And that was a great time, too, because you mentioned Coverdale Page earlier. I mean, think about that. We had Coverdale Page and we had Fate of Nations, where Robert's finally not trying to be commercial. He's just kind of doing what he wants. Has a couple guitars, getting a little folksy in there, a little acoustic. I mean, he's got in his zone in Fate of Nations for sure. And then Coverdale Page. I remember that was great, too, good times, because I was able to get promo tapes of those, or advanced tapes, just from somebody else going to a record show, and they had the tape before it came out. So it's just cool being in that person that had this tape before the album came out. Yeah, it's a very good album.
Yeah, that was a good time. I remember I saw Plant in 90, and then I saw him again in 93, and, you know, I snuck a tape recorder in and recorded the show at Bally's in 93, sent it to Denny so he could do a proper transfer of it. And unfortunately, I think along with Denny's collection, big, massive collection of CDs and DVDs and all of that stuff, I think it's kind of lost at this point. I don't know what's become of it. I know that Denny's wife, you know, obviously with Denny passing away, you know, things haven't been well, and I just don't know what happened to that collection. But, you know, going back to 93 with Coverdale Page, and that album, it just rocked. You know, I'm like, where'd this album come from? You know,
for Jimmy, I mean, that's what you want from Jimmy. It's just, you know, a couple guitar overdubs. Like, you go to walking into Clarksdale, you know, it just wasn't there. That I was kind of let down on that solo project by them, by Page and Plant. You just expected more, and Plant's vocals, I mean, he could have done a lot more, and who knows if he wanted to, because, you know, he worked so hard to be Robert Plant solo, and next thing he knows, if he has a blowout album with Page Plant, he's right back where he started from with Zeppelin. So I don't think that he gave as much effort that he could have for lyric wise. I mean, of course, we have Please Read the Letter and Most High and a few other good songs on there, but I think it could have definitely been better. But yeah, Jimmy's playing was just phenomenal on that. I mean, it was just really good on Coverdale Page, that is.
Right. So wrapping this up a little bit, I mean, because, dude, we could sit here and talk for years.
Wait, is this live right now?
Oh, yeah, baby.
Oh, I thought we're editing this out later. Okay.
No, man.
Now you tell me.
Oh, yeah, but that's when the good stuff comes out.
You didn't read the disclaimer at the beginning, right?
I can pull it if you need me to. It's no big deal. But as far as Zeppelin, and I mean, you know, live collecting and just, you know, what do you think as far as official releases? What do you think that we already know about? What do you think should be officially released? And where do you think the future of Zeppelin collecting is going? I know it's a tough question, but...
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think with what's out there and what could be released, and, you know, we have they're working on a documentary. So eventually that's going to come out. I know they were in Cannes a couple of years ago trying to sell the documentary. So hopefully we might see the documentary at the end of this year or next year, either a theater or, you know, streaming, however it comes out. So I'm hoping to see some amazing footage on that. From my understanding, the documentary is only going to be 69 and 70, so which is an interesting idea for a documentary on Zeppelin, since, you know, they went all through the 70s. But, you know, fingers crossed that there's something we haven't seen. We talked about 69 performance. There's talk about Central Park 69. So could you imagine that on video? Shoot, that'd be amazing. So there's a lot of stuff out there, I would imagine, just from private collection. And then, you know, what to expect in the future. Who knows? It's all YouTube, right? Because I've been collecting videos since the early 80s. I've paid a lot of money for video back in the days. I have a friend who collects 8mm, and, you know, we hunted down a lot of stuff and, you know, was able to get a lot of stuff. And, you know, all this stuff is just popping up on YouTube now. So, you know, these people don't realize the value of selling it, so they put it up. So it's awesome for us because it's all free. So that's really it. And we got the people from Dogs of Doom that are doing an amazing job. I can't get enough credit to Eric Levy, who does all the sync jobs on all that stuff. And he's just awesome on syncing all the material. And he's uncovered so much stuff in the last year. It's wonderful from someone like me who loves video so much. I actually prefer watching an 8mm clip that's 3 minutes long versus the whole show. I don't have time to watch the whole show. I could watch a 3 minute clip and get the full effect and move on. But I think that the future is all going to be on YouTube and just quick clips. No one hangs out and watches it and absorbs it. It just listen to it real quick and move on to the next one.
Yeah,
I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, that could be maybe that mentality. Your reasons could be why Jimmy hasn't. Part of the reasons, or one of the reasons why Jimmy hasn't officially released like one of the full Nebworth shows, or a full Earl's Court show. I mean, he before the DVD came out, all that stuff got digitized, and Kevin Shirley worked on the audio and that type of thing. I would like to think that if you're going to do a few songs for posterity's sake, you might as well fix everything and mix it properly and do the complete shows. So if you ever do want to put that content out at some point, it's already done and ready to go.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure they have some kind of plan in place. I mean, because they're not getting any younger, neither are we. So I'm sure they have something in place as far as what the next 20 years will look like for Zeppelin releases. So we'll see what happens.
Right. And, anytime.
But there's not much. Sorry to cut you off, but
no.
I was going to say, you really think about it, there's not much. I mean, it's not like the Who or the Stones. There's not a lot of footage out there. I mean, stuff comes up 8mm wise, but when you think of pro shot wise, they didn't. That's what I love about the band. They cared about just getting on stage and playing live. They didn't care about the backstage buffet. They didn't care about the food backstage. They flew in, they jumped on stage, and they flew back to their hotel. They were just get on stage and let's play. So I don't think they invested a lot. Of course they had their soundboards, but I don't think it's more like, let's get a TV crew out here, let's do this, let's film us, let's do a video release, that kind of thing, or a theater release. It's all about the music for them, and it truly shows. Yeah,
it absolutely does. Well, Mark, my friend, I appreciate the fact that you came on here, and didn't mean to surprise you with the live thing, but I knew
I'm just joking.
No. I knew we wouldn't really get into anything that would get anybody in trouble. So, I appreciate the time, and I'll send you a link to this. Actually, if you're on FBO, I posted a link in there as well, but I'll shoot it over to you so you can check it out. Dude, it's been an absolute pleasure. We should do it again in the future when something new comes out, and we can even do like a 5-10 minute thing and just fanboy out, because it'll be
right on.
It'll be a lot of fun. Thank you, dude. I appreciate it.
All right, dude.
You have a great day. Enjoy 4th of July tomorrow. Don't blow any of your fingers off. But
yeah, right on.
All right, bud. Take care, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Long live that, buddy.
Yeah. Take care. So everybody, that was Mr. Mark McFall, one of the big Zeppelin collectors out there. Huge fan like I am, lives and breathes and loves the band. So I knew it would be a good episode to have Mark on, and you guys could hear some of the stories about what it's like to be a Zeppelin collector from way back in the day, and what we went through to get new stuff, and what it was like when some new recording would come out, and I mean, we'd all jump at the chance to get it. So on that note, I'm going to hit that outro music. You guys take care, and we'll have a new episode next week. And don't forget, if you're on iTunes, we're on iTunes. Hit subscribe to the podcast. Like it, leave a review. We're on Spotify as well. Facebook, groups, like page. Like us. Have a good day.